Young nurse was ready to donate her kidney to save a dying patient until this man arrived and shocked everyone. In a bustling hospital, young nurse Fiona stood by the bed of her dying patient, Mr. Dawson. His condition had worsened, and doctors were running out of time. The only hope was a kidney transplant, but a match seemed impossible. Without hesitation, Fiona had already volunteered to donate one of her own kidneys. She knew the risks, but her desire to save him outweighed her fear. Mr. Dawson was in his late 60s, frail, unconscious, and slipping further with each passing minute. Machines beeped steadily, charting the gradual decline of a man whose time was running out. Fiona, though exhausted from double shifts and long nights, stood steady by his side. There was something about Mr. Dawson, a man with no close relatives and few friends, that stirred a protective instinct in her. Maybe it was the way he reminded her of her grandfather, or perhaps it was just her calling as a nurse. But what she felt wasn't just duty, it was personal. The transplant team had run out of options. No matches from the registry. No family to turn to. Fiona's blood type and medical history had made her a viable candidate, and without hesitation, she had volunteered. Her colleagues were torn, impressed by her courage, worried for her well-being. But Fiona's heart was set. As preparations were being made for the transplant, a tall, stern man in a tailored suit entered the room, his presence commanding attention. His eyes locked onto Fiona. "I'm here to help," he said, his voice calm yet firm. The room went silent. Fiona frowned in confusion. The man stepped forward, eyes now shifting to Mr. Dawson. He introduced himself as Jonathan Clark, the estranged son of a wealthy business tycoon. There was skepticism in the air, but Jonathan had come prepared. He handed the attending physician a file, medical records, proof of identity, and compatibility test results. To everyone's astonishment, he was a perfect match. The transplant team rushed to verify the information. Tension crackled like static in the room. Fiona watched Jonathan closely. He wasn't the type to show vulnerability, yet something in his eyes told a deeper story. He wasn't just here as a match. He was here with purpose. Fiona stepped aside, her heart pounding with conflicting emotions. Relief that Mr. Dawson might be saved. Confusion over who Jonathan truly was. Frustration at having prepared herself emotionally and physically for a surgery that now might not happen. In the quiet moments that followed, Fiona left the room and stood by a window overlooking the hospital courtyard. The city moved on outside. Cars, people, noise, but her world had frozen. The decision to give up a part of herself had come from a place of deep empathy, and now, just as quickly, it was being unraveled by a stranger. Her mind replayed the moment she had signed the donor papers, the hours of preoperative testing, the conversations with Anna, her mentor, who had gently questioned if Fiona was ready for such a step. Fiona had always prided herself on her resolve, but this unexpected twist left her unsure. Jonathan found her later, standing by the window. "You were going to do it," he said softly. Fiona nodded, unable to find words. "That's incredibly brave. Not many people would even consider it." She finally looked at him. "Why are you doing this?" Jonathan hesitated. "Because I need to. Not for recognition. Not even for forgiveness. Just because I should have come a long time ago." He walked away, leaving Fiona with her thoughts. She returned to Mr. Dawson's room and saw him still unconscious, but more stable now with the promise of a donor. Later that evening, the transplant team confirmed Jonathan's match. The surgery would move forward with him as the donor. Fiona stepped back willingly, though her heart ached with the weight of what almost was. She wasn't disappointed, just changed. The story of a nurse willing to sacrifice her life was quietly shared among staff. It wasn't in the newspapers or blasted on the news, but it touched every corner of the hospital. The nurses, the janitors, the surgeons all knew what Fiona had done. The sterile hum of the hospital seemed quieter than usual as Fiona sat on the bench in the staff lounge, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea. She hadn't slept in nearly 24 hours, but it wasn't exhaustion that kept her wired. It was him. Jonathan Clark. The mysterious man who had walked into Mr. Dawson's room just hours earlier, file in hand, declaring he was here to help. A perfect kidney match, he'd said. And now, Fiona sat replaying the moment over and over like a scene from a movie. She couldn't pause. She had prepared herself mentally to give a part of her body to save a stranger. She had undergone tests, signed papers, braced herself for the consequences. Then out of nowhere, Jonathan had swept in with polished shoes and a carefully neutral expression, offering to take her place. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even sure what she was feeling. Confused, yes. Relieved, maybe. But also unsettled. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Fiona looked up to see Jonathan standing there. Gone was the stiff businessman persona from earlier. He looked different, vulnerable. "May I?" he asked. Fiona nodded, motioning to the chair opposite her. He sat, resting his clasped hands on the table between them. "I figured you deserved an explanation," Jonathan began. Fiona didn't respond. Her silence was invitation enough. "I'm Jonathan Dawson Clark," he said slowly. "My father is Arthur Dawson." "Yes, that Dawson." Fiona's eyes widened. "The business tycoon?" she asked, surprised. Jonathan nodded. "That's him. Mr. Dawson, Arthur, is my father, but I haven't seen him in nearly 12 years. The words hung heavy between them. Fiona frowned. Then why now? Why walk in today of all days to save him? Jonathan leaned back in the chair, his eyes fixed on a point in the distance, as if he were watching a memory unfold. "It's complicated," he said. "Growing up, my father and I were different. He was a man of ambition, always working, always building. I was more into books, people, ideas that couldn't be quantified in bank accounts." Fiona noticed the way Jonathan's jaw tightened as he spoke. He didn't take well to that. "We fought. A lot. Eventually, I left. Moved across the country, built a life on my own. We cut ties. I didn't think I'd ever see him again." He turned his gaze back to her. "But last week, I got a call from one of his old colleagues. Said my father was in critical condition. No family had come forward. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't owe him anything, but I couldn't ignore it either." Fiona listened, her earlier skepticism softening. She had imagined many things about Jonathan, a hired donor, maybe a hidden agenda, but not this. Not a son walking into the storm of a past he had long left behind. "So you came here to donate?" she asked. Jonathan nodded. "I got tested before I even reached out to the hospital. I didn't want to make things more complicated. If I wasn't a match, I'd just disappear." Fiona exhaled slowly. "You're a better person than you think." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't know about that. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's the realization that time doesn't wait for pride to dissolve. But I knew I couldn't let someone else, especially you, risk everything for a man I used to call Dad." Fiona leaned back, her mind swirling. She had spent days preparing to give up her kidney, ready to suffer physically and emotionally for someone she barely knew. And here was Jonathan, doing the same, but for someone he once loved, resented, and had been shaped by. The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Softer. "You don't owe him anything," Fiona said quietly. "You could have stayed away. No one would have judged you." Jonathan looked down, his voice low. "But I would have judged myself." She nodded, understanding more than he realized. They sat in silence for a few minutes, two strangers bound by the same man, the same situation, but different histories. Finally, Fiona broke the silence. "Thank you for doing this." Jonathan looked up, surprised. "I mean it," she added. "I don't think I even realized how scared I was. But you showed up. You gave him something I couldn't." He shrugged. "You were ready to give him everything." Fiona gave a small smile. "Sometimes readiness and reality are two different things." He nodded, slowly, as if weighing her words. "Do you think he'll want to see me?" he asked after a moment. "I think. He might not remember you at first," Fiona said gently. "But I think deep down, he will." Jonathan gave a soft chuckle. "That's optimistic." "It's human," she said. Another pause. "I hated him for a long time," Jonathan admitted. "But when I saw him today, lying there, helpless, it wasn't hate I felt. It was sadness. I don't know why." Fiona nodded slowly. "Because no matter how complicated things get, there's still a thread that connects us to people. Sometimes it's tangled, but it's there." They sat a while longer, the weight of Jonathan's confession settling like dust in sunlight. Fiona could see now that he wasn't just a savior swooping in. He was a man unraveling years of pain to do the right thing. She respected that. "Will you stay?" Fiona asked. Jonathan looked up. "For the surgery?" "No. After." "For him." He hesitated. "I don't know. Depends on how things go. But I'll try." Fiona smiled, just a little. Trying counts for something. He returned the smile, this time with a bit more warmth. "So truce." "Truce," she said. They shook hands, not like colleagues, not like strangers, but like two people who had seen something raw and human in each other. When Jonathan stood to leave, He paused at the door. "You're one of the bravest people I've ever met, Fiona." She laughed softly. "I'm just a nurse." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You're the nurse." And with that, he walked out, leaving Fiona sitting in the same spot, her tea now cold, but her heart just a little warmer. The corridor was quieter than usual. It was one of those rare moments in the hospital when the buzz softened, the halls half-lit, voices hushed, and footsteps slowed. Fiona moved through it like a ghost, her nurse's badge swaying gently with each step, her thoughts louder than the ambient noise around her. She didn't remember when she had last eaten or slept. Time had blurred into something ungraspable since the moment Jonathan arrived with the news that he was a perfect match. Before that, everything had felt certain, even in the uncertainty. She was ready to donate her kidney. It would be hard, yes. Painful, yes. But she had made peace with it. Now, peace had vanished. And what replaced it was something she hadn't expected: doubt. Her shoes echoed faintly on the tile floor as she passed the ICU wing, her eyes catching glimpses of patients sleeping behind glass doors, nurses monitoring machines, family members silently praying. The weight in her chest tightened. In her pocket, her fingers brushed against something soft, the edge of a worn photograph. She paused at a small alcove near the stairwell. No one ever came here. It was her quiet place when the world spun too fast. Slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the photo. It was faded, edges curling. Her younger brother, and their mother, smiling, arms wrapped around each other on the porch of their childhood home. The last time they were all together before the accident. Her brother had needed a kidney back then, too. But there had been no Jonathan to walk in. There had only been loss. She stared at the photo, a storm rising behind her eyes. "Fiona," a soft voice called from behind. She turned. It was Anna. Of course it was Anna. The older nurse had a way of knowing exactly when Fiona needed her, even when Fiona didn't say a word. Anna stepped closer, her tone gentle. "You've been walking this hallway for 20 minutes. You okay?" Fiona gave a small, tired smile. "Trying to be." Anna looked at her for a long moment, then nodded toward a nearby bench. "Sit." They sat side by side, silence settling between them. Anna waited patiently, never one to rush a conversation. Fiona stared ahead at the linoleum floor. "I was ready," Fiona finally said. "I was completely ready to go through with it. The tests, the pain, the recovery, I had already pictured it all. I thought, if I could save him, then it would mean something." Anna didn't interrupt. She just listened. "But then Jonathan shows up," Fiona continued. "And suddenly, I don't know what to do. Part of me is relieved. But another part feels like I've failed." Anna tilted her head slightly. "Failed? I made a promise to myself. To Mr. Dawson. I was going to help him. I had to help him. And now that I don't have to, now that someone else can, I feel lost." Anna placed a comforting hand over Fiona's. "Sweetheart, you were willing to give up a part of your body to save someone you barely know. That's not failure. That's courage." Fiona looked down, blinking quickly. "But what if this was supposed to be my purpose? What if stepping aside means I didn't try hard enough?" Anna squeezed her hand. "Trying isn't always about doing it all alone. Sometimes, real strength is knowing when to let someone else step in." Fiona sat with those words for a while. The logical part of her knew Anna was right. But the emotional part, the part that had been forged in years of caring, grieving, giving, it didn't want to let go so easily. She thought back to when she first met Mr. Dawson. A quiet man with soft eyes, no family to speak of, no visitors. She had made it her mission to brighten his days. She brought him books, listened to his stories when he could speak, held his hand when he was too weak to move. He reminded her of her grandfather, the way he used to smile through the pain, the way he hated asking for help. Fiona saw herself in that. Maybe that was why she had jumped so quickly to sacrifice. She stood abruptly. "I need to see him." Anna didn't question it. She simply stood too. "I'll walk with you." They moved together through the corridors. The hum of machines grew louder as they approached Mr. Dawson's room. Fiona paused just outside the door, staring through the small window. He was still unconscious, but his face looked more peaceful than before. Monitors beeped steadily. A small bouquet of flowers, probably from Jonathan, sat at his bedside. Anna gently touched Fiona's shoulder. "He's going to be okay. Jonathan's a good match." Fiona nodded slowly. "I know." A breath escaped her lips, long and heavy, like the end of a long-held note. Then what's really stopping you? Anna asked quietly. Fiona turned toward her. I think I'm afraid of letting go of control, of accepting that someone else can finish what I started. Anna gave her a knowing look. That's a hard thing to accept, especially for someone like you. But this isn't just about you or Jonathan or even Mr. Dawson. It's about what's best. And what's best is not sacrificing yourself when another option exists. Fiona closed her eyes. She let Anna's words sink in. Let the hallway noise fade. Let the scent of antiseptic and lavender mix in the air. In that silence, in that stillness, she found her answer. When she opened her eyes, they were clearer than they had been in days. I'm stepping back, she said aloud. I'll still be here, but I'm not going to fight fate. Anna smiled. That's the bravest thing I've heard all day. Fiona turned and walked away from Mr. Dawson's room, not because she was giving up, but because she finally understood that letting go could be an act of love, too. Later that evening, Fiona stood outside on the hospital rooftop, watching the horizon shift into hues of gold and lilac. The city glowed with life, and for the first time in days, her chest didn't feel so heavy. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph again. Her fingers ran over the worn edges. Thank you, she whispered, not to the photo, but to herself. Because even in stepping aside, she had never stopped being a nurse. Never stopped being the kind of person who chooses love, even when it hurts. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. Fiona sat on the rigid bench just outside the operating theater, her hands clasped tightly together on her lap, knuckles pale from the strain. Around her, the quiet murmurs of the hospital's night shift whispered through the corridor like ghosts passing in the dark. Every tick of the wall clock above her head felt like a hammer to her nerves. She had been there for hours, waiting, hoping, praying. She could still see Mr. Dawson's face from earlier that morning, pale and fragile under the dim lighting of the ICU. He had been prepped for surgery, sedated and unmoving, but Fiona had stood by his side for a long time before the surgical team wheeled him away. She hadn't said much, just gently touched his arm, like she always did, and whispered, "You're going to be okay." Then he was gone, through those large swinging double doors, into the hands of fate. And of Jonathan. Jonathan. He was somewhere behind those doors, too. The man who had stepped into this story like a sudden gust of wind, disrupting everything she thought she had prepared herself for. He hadn't needed to do any of this. Yet he did. And now, he was the one lying on an operating table, saving the life of the man she had fought so hard for. Fiona's fingers trembled slightly as she rubbed her palms together, trying to stay warm in the over-air-conditioned hallway. Her thoughts swirled in 100 directions. What if there were complications? What if the body rejected the kidney? What if? The door creaked open. She shot to her feet. A surgeon in scrubs emerged, removing his mask and cap. Fiona's eyes scanned his face, searching for any sign, any clue. He gave a gentle, tired smile. "It went well," he said simply. Fiona gasped softly, her hand flying to her chest. "Really?" The surgeon nodded. "The transplant was successful. Both donor and recipient are stable. The kidney took almost immediately. We'll be monitoring them closely for the next 24 hours, but right now, everything looks very good." Her knees nearly buckled with relief. She leaned back against the wall, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her vision blurred for a moment as a flood of emotion swept over her: gratitude, joy, exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered. Not just to the surgeon, but to the universe, to fate, to the people who hadn't let her carry the burden alone. Jonathan. She looked down the hallway. At the far end, a nurse wheeled Jonathan out of recovery and into a private room. His face was pale but peaceful, his eyes still closed. Fiona followed quietly, pausing at the doorway, hesitant. The nurse noticed her and gave a small nod of recognition before slipping past. Fiona stepped in. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a bedside lamp. Machines beeped steadily beside Jonathan, but his breathing was calm and even. She moved closer, unsure of whether to say anything. He looked so different now, not the sharply dressed man who had once strode into Mr. Dawson's room with an air of quiet authority. Now, stripped of that armor, he looked human, vulnerable. She pulled up a chair and sat beside him. For a while, she said nothing, just watched him breathe. Then, quietly, "Thank you." His eyes fluttered open. He blinked a few times, adjusting to the light, and then turned his head slightly to look at her. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You're welcome," he said, his voice hoarse. They looked at each other in silence, a shared understanding passing between them that didn't need to be spoken aloud. You didn't have to do it, Fiona said softly. I did, he replied. For him. For me. For a lot of reasons. She nodded slowly. He's going to be okay. Jonathan smiled a little wider. Then it was worth it. They sat there for a while, two strangers bound together by something deeper than duty, deeper than obligation. Two people who had made a choice to put someone else's life ahead of their own. Eventually, Fiona stood. I should check on Mr. Dawson. Jonathan nodded. Tell him I said hi. Fiona smiled. I will. Days passed, each one marking a small victory, a stable heartbeat, a functioning kidney, consciousness returning. He opened his eyes 2 days after the surgery, blinking up at the ceiling, confused and groggy. Fiona was by his side when it happened. You're awake, she said, her voice trembling with relief. He turned his head toward her, trying to speak, but his throat was dry. Shh, don't push it, she said gently, placing a straw to his lips. You've been through a lot, but you're safe now. You made it. A tear slipped down his cheek. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming realization that he was still alive. In the days that followed, Fiona remained a constant presence at his bedside. She told him everything about the transplant, about Jonathan, about the moment she chose to step aside. He listened in silence, his eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, he reached for her hand and held it tightly. You saved me, he whispered. Fiona shook her head. No, Jonathan did. You both did, Mr. Dawson corrected. In different ways. Later that week, Fiona found herself walking outside the hospital, the sun warm on her face. She hadn't felt its light in what felt like weeks. The air was crisp, and the trees rustled gently in the breeze. Life was continuing all around her, vibrant and unapologetic. She sat on a bench near the hospital garden, watching people pass, doctors on breaks, patients being wheeled in the sun, families visiting loved ones. And then she saw him, Jonathan, walking slowly with the help of a nurse. He looked tired, but his face lit up when he saw her. You're up, she said, standing to meet him. Couldn't stay in that room forever, he joked. They sat together, the nurse giving them space. I keep thinking about how close we came to losing him, Fiona said. Jonathan nodded. Me too. I thought I had to be the one to save him. That if I didn't, no one would. And I thought I was too late, he admitted. They shared a quiet laugh. Fiona turned to him, her voice soft. Thank you for not letting me carry it alone. Jonathan looked at her, his eyes warm. We saved him together. The two sat in silence as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Birds fluttered through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a wind chime sang. It was a new beginning, not just for Mr. Dawson, but for Fiona, for Jonathan, for the unexpected bond forged in the face of sacrifice, courage, and healing. Weeks had passed, and the world had moved on in ways Fiona had never imagined. The steady rhythm of the hospital, the endless flow of patients, the hum of machines, everything had returned to normal. But for Fiona, normal would never feel the same again. She walked down the hospital corridor with a different kind of weight in her step today, not one that carried exhaustion or uncertainty, but a sense of fulfillment, quiet pride, and even hope. Her uniform felt different against her skin now. It wasn't just a symbol of her role as a nurse. It was a reminder of how much she had given and how much she had received in return. As she reached the end of the hallway, she stopped in front of the door to Mr. Dawson's room. The door was open, and the scene before her brought a lump to her throat. Mr. Dawson was standing with his family, his wife, his children, and grandchildren, all gathered around him. His face, once pale and fragile, was now glowing with health. He laughed as he adjusted the straps of his jacket, ready to be discharged. His eyes met Fiona's, and he smiled, his lips trembling slightly with emotion. Fiona, he said, his voice thick with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you. You gave me a second chance at life. Fiona's heart swelled, and she stepped forward, her hand reaching for his. She didn't need words to express how much it meant to hear that. She simply held his hand, her eyes glistening as his family stood behind him, equally moved. You don't need to thank me, she replied softly, her voice almost breaking. I'm just glad you're okay. His family, now overwhelmed with emotion, murmured their thanks. A daughter stepped forward, holding a small bouquet of flowers. Thank you for everything, Fiona, she said. You've given us more than we could ever repay. Fiona blinked, her heart racing. It wasn't the flowers or the words, though. They were beautiful. It was the recognition, the acknowledgement that what she had done had truly made a difference. As she was about to say something else, she caught sight of Jonathan, who had quietly approached the group. He was standing at the doorway, his smile soft and understanding. He was no longer a stranger, no longer someone who had simply stepped in at the right moment. He had become something more, someone who had shared this journey with her, silently and steadfastly. "Thank you," Fiona said to him, her voice filled with appreciation. "For everything." Jonathan nodded, a small smile on his lips. "We made a great team, didn't we?" She smiled back, the words unspoken but clear between them. Yes, they had. Later that evening, as the hospital grew quieter, Fiona's shift came to an end. Just as she was about to clock out, her supervisor appeared at her side, a serious expression on her face. "Fiona," she said gently, "the administrator wants to see you in his office." Fiona's brow furrowed. "Now, just a few minutes. Go on ahead." Still confused, Fiona walked to the administrator's office, her steps hesitant. What could this possibly be about? When she entered the room, she was taken aback by the sight of Mr. Dawson and his family sitting at the table. Mr. Dawson stood up when she walked in. "Fiona," he said, his voice warm and full of gratitude. "We wanted to thank you properly." Fiona opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the administrator handed her a thick envelope and with a smile said, "We've been instructed to present you with this." Fiona's eyes widened as she opened the envelope. Inside was a certificate, an official certificate of honor, and a check for $3 million. Her hand trembled as she held the check. It wasn't just the money, Al. It was the recognition, the tangible acknowledgement of her courage, her willingness to risk it all. The reward wasn't just about the amount. It was a symbol of what she had done, what she had sacrificed, and how it had changed everything for everyone involved. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision as she looked from Mr. Dawson to his family, and then to Jonathan, standing quietly by the door. They were all watching her, waiting for her response. I don't know what to say," Fiona whispered, overwhelmed. "I didn't do this for a reward." Mr. Dawson stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "You risked your life, Fiona. You saved mine. This is the least we can do to show you how much that means to us." Fiona nodded, trying to hold back the flood of emotions welling inside her. She had never expected recognition, just the quiet fulfillment of knowing she had done the right thing. But this was something else, something that reached into the very core of her. She glanced at Jonathan, who gave her a small, reassuring nod. In that moment, she realized that the reward, the recognition, the certificate, it wasn't about the money. It was about the journey. It was about understanding the importance of human connection, of sacrifice, and of letting go when it mattered most. With trembling hands, Fiona accepted the check, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you all." And with that, a new chapter began for Fiona. Not one defined by the weight of sacrifice, but by the warmth of knowing that her actions had made a difference. Her heart swelled, knowing that the journey she had taken had not only saved Mr. Dawson's life, but had given her a reward far more meaningful than money could ever buy. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the journey of Fiona, Jonathan, and Mr. Dawson. What did you think of how everything unfolded? How did you feel about the ending and the emotional moments they shared? Please share your rating for the story on a scale of 1 to 10. We'd love to know your thoughts. Also, let us know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments. It's always great to see how far our stories travel. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to hear what you think.